everyone. I see people coming in slowly. Zoom is sluggish on a Monday, like maybe some of us are feeling. Happy Monday to everyone. I'm going to give everyone a quick second to get logged on and connected to audio. It's still popping in people slowly. Good to see some faces that I recognize and some faces that I'm not as familiar with. Great to see everybody today. We're rounding out the end of this month. It's hard to believe. I don't know if any of you feel like this, but I cannot believe it's like towards the end of January already. This has been a fast month already. So we are excited to see you for another day. We're having a spotlight program today on a treatment. And while you're getting hooked onto audio, I will introduce myself. I'm Anissa Mitchell with Parkinson and Movement Disorder Alliance. And we are going to have a conversation today about communication with Parkinson's and an option for this. And while you're getting connected, if you have questions throughout our conversation today, please enable your chat box. If you scroll to the bottom of your screen and you see where it says chat, just click on that. And you can put your messages in there. You can give a shout out and say where you're from, where you're joining us from. Yes, TK says it's a slow Monday. I agree. So if you want to share that, please do that as well. So I'm going to introduce our speakers. We have Jessica Huber with us today. She is a professor of speech, language, and hearing sciences and an associate dean of research at the College of Health and Human Sciences at Purdue University. She's been involved in funding or some research funded by the National Institute of Health on developing a theoretical account for physiological, psychological, and cognitive factors that influence speech production in older adults with or without Parkinson's. And she's translated these findings into a clinical treatment. She is an inventor of a small wearable device, which is called the Speechvive device, which is something we're going to be talking about today. And this device elicits a Lombard effect that can be exploited to improve speech clarity with people with Parkinson's. So I'm excited to learn about what that means. And then we also have with us Ashleigh Lambert, who is a speech therapist and vice president of the clinical development for Speechvive. She's a practicing speech language pathologist across a variety of settings, specifically with neurogenic communication disorder. So that's a mouthful. And I'm very excited to have these two experts with us today. So ladies, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, well, I'm going to let you guys kind of launch into your conversation. I do know you have some slides, and folks, if you have questions throughout the conversation today, I'm going to be monitoring those for them. Feel free, and if they're relevant to that specific slide, we'll try to ask these questions as we go. Otherwise, some of them may be left towards the end, but we'll try to get to everyone's questions. All right, ladies, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Okay, so the way that we, Ashleigh and I are going to kind of split the presentation, and we'll work together to answer all your questions. I think Ashleigh is going to start, and just to give you an idea, we're kind of talking about the Speechvive device and using that to achieve your communication goals. Do you want to go to the next slide, Ashleigh? So just for acknowledgements and disclosures, as you already heard, a lot of this funding was from the National Institutes of Health, so your tax dollars at work. And then we had some other funding from some foundations and internal Purdue support, and of course from the company Speechvive. And then can you just slide back to that? we have some financial disclosures. Obviously, I receive a salary from, well, hopefully, obviously, I receive a salary from Purdue University, and I was supported by my NIH grants. I am the inventor and co-founder of Speechvive, the company, the device, and the company, and I serve on the board of directors. I serve as the chief scientific officer, and I own part of the company. Ashleigh Lambert receives salary from Speechvive Incorporated and is the vice president for clinical development. And so we just want to make sure you know our disclosures up front before we start talking about the treatment. And of course, this work can't be done without a lot of people. And so we have a large number of engineers, speech scientists, students from first year undergraduates all the way to last year doctoral students who worked with us. This is just a short list of some of the people who have been involved. Okay.
All right,
So I'm going to let Ashleigh take it over.
Perfect. Again, thank you so much for having us. Jessica and I are so excited to be here. We're especially excited because when we met with Becky and Anissa, they said, we want to hear stories. We want to hear about what happens when people use the Speechvive. And that's great because Jessica and I get to talk about statistics all day long. No one ever cares about what actually happens when we put the device on somebody. So just kind of take an inventory of yourself, of your loved ones, and think if you've ever said this or felt this way. I feel like I'm talking loud enough, but my loved ones can't hear or understand me. I get left out of the conversation. I've had people tell me, my husband sent me to 4 different audiologists. They all said my hearing was fine, but I still can't hear him. So this is common. This happens all the time. You're not alone. Here's another one. He has so much to say, and I want him to contribute to the conversation, but he was always the life of the party. And that's something that really can change as communication skills change, as your voice changes. It can become frustrating and harder to communicate and easier just not to and let someone else take it over. So I have a feeling there are probably some heads nodding. I can't see everybody all at once with my screen like this, but just know you're in good company. This is very common. The study shows 75 to 90% of people with Parkinson's will experience speech and voice changes as a result of the disease. This isn't something where I can tell you that by stage 3 or 4, you're going to experience this. It really can be at any point along the process. In fact, Linda Ronstadt has said in a number of interviews, one of the first symptoms she experienced was changes to her voice. Other people will say, you know, I'm not there yet, but I need to know this information for later on. So what exactly are we talking about when we talk about these specific changes to speech with Parkinson's? Really, the hallmark changes are that low volume, slurred speech, and changes in speech rate. Sometimes people will say, you know, people describe it as they feel like they sound drunk, or their mouth is slushy or slurred, or they just they feel like they're speaking loud enough and no one hears them. That's all very typical and common. In fact, with the feeling like you're speaking loud enough, but no one's hearing you, is actually a major part of what's changing with your speech volume. You have these physiological changes that make it harder to get loud, but also the way your brain's perceiving your own voice. It's telling you you're loud enough, even when you're not. They've done studies and shown people with Parkinson's will rate their volume as one of the highest in a group, when in fact, in actuality, it's typically one of the lowest. So with the self-perception deficits, really what you need to understand is you have a more difficult time perceiving your own speech severity, the accuracy of your speech, and your speech errors. So you're not even able to really self-monitor and hear the changes to your own voice. So this kind of goes back to the guy that sent his wife to 4 different audiologists. He felt his voice was fine. He felt like he was speaking loud enough and should have been able to be heard loud and clear, when in fact, he had been experiencing those changes, and we were able to show him that in therapy. So as far as the self-perception deficits, what does that mean for me as a speech pathologist when you come to my office? I'm really thinking about how am I going to get you on the same page of understanding and hearing those changes to your voice so that we can then target and work on strategies that are going to be most effective for you. I have to kind of sell you on the idea that you need therapy. Often it's a loved one telling you to come in and see me. So you're going to have to look at that, and you're going to have to, a lot of the times we do exercises where we talk about, okay, tell me situations where other people weren't understanding what you said, or you felt like you had to repeat yourself often. And let's think about that. And we're going to look at how people respond to you when you're using other strategies or devices like the Speechvive. And we're going to use that to rank how you're doing and improving.
Ashleigh, before you go on, we had a question kind of I saw pop up that I don't want to get off this slide till we answer this, about hearing versus auditory processing. And I just wanted to say that's not, these differences with self-perception aren't really that you can't hear or you have an auditory processing disorder. It really is in the areas of the brain that are impacted most by Parkinson's disease. They are part of the system where you monitor yourself. And so this is more self-monitoring than hearing or auditory processing. It's kind of a different part of that system. So I just wanted to clarify that before we got too far.
Absolutely. And we can talk about that again, but this would be similarly to just like when you're walking. I bet you've been told to take bigger steps. And it's not that you're intentionally taking smaller steps, it's that you perceive that you're taking the same size step you always did, when in fact it has shortened. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we talk about cues as well. So when you're coming to therapy, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on the other types of therapy. I know Becky and Anissa said that you have talked about two of the other types of speech therapy for Parkinson's, which would be Speak Out and LSVT. When you're coming to therapy, there's typically two types of cues or strategies that we can use. We've got internal cues and external cues. And this isn't just limited to speech therapy. This is in any type of learning that we're doing. So an internal cue is that unconscious information or self-cueing that's guiding your practice. So that's like me thinking about, I know I'm taking a small step. I need to take that bigger step. I need to push myself beyond where I'm comfortable and remember to take that bigger step every time I walk. An external cue would be some type of visual or auditory or other type of feedback that's not inside my brain that I can count on to trigger me to make that change. So in terms of walking, that would be like putting lines on the floor. This is also what they use, and then me saying, I want you to step on each line. So I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to remember, and I don't have to kind of calibrate my brain. I can just use that external cue. This is very similar to what is used in sports. If I'm practicing a tennis serve, my coach isn't necessarily going to take me step by step and tell me what to think. They're going to say, I want the ball to go here. And then I practice and I get it there. So again, going back to that walking example, studies have been done looking at internal versus external cues. And really one of the best examples is that gait pattern, that walking pattern. It's been shown to improve in response to both an internal or an external cue. I can tell you, I want you to think about taking a bigger step. Every time you take a step, I want it to be big. We can do that. I bet you guys have had that kind of coaching before. The other way we can do it are the lines on the floor. And I'm going to make those lines the correct length. What we've shown is that the same kinds of cues work for walking as work for handwriting or even speaking. So that's that. I want you to think about being louder. I want you to feel loud. I want you to be loud every time you talk. But what we know is internal cues can break down. it's harder for them to generalize outside of that practice session when you've got that coach right there telling you what to do and reminding you, which is really an external cue. Once we get into more of a typical everyday situation with our walking, with our talking, there's a lot of other things going on around us. We're having to remember what to say, who we're talking to. We're probably walking and talking, so we're scanning the environment to make sure there's nothing, no obstacles. There's a lot going on. It's the walking and chewing gum phenomenon. So where internal cues can be difficult to generalize outside of that therapy or coaching model, the external cues, if I kept lines on the street everywhere you went, and I said, I want you to walk to the line, just like the U-step walker has a line that goes with you, that generalizes. We see people having better results. Same thing with speech. If there was a way to keep your voice loud with an external cue every time you talk, where you didn't have to think about it, we know that you would have a better chance of generalizing that and using that loud voice in all situations where you weren't reminded.
Hey, Ashleigh,
So,
before we go off this slide, I had a private message from someone who said that they don't, some of them don't know what we're saying when we say LSVT or speak out. Can we just give like a sentence each and distinguish them from the Speechvive for them?
Yes. So when you go to a speech therapist, frequently your doctor will recommend LSVT loud or speak out. Those are a more typical, what we think of when we think of therapy, where you're going to sit across from a therapist and you're going to practice. Both of these speech therapies focus on a single target of being loud. And that's because the research shows when we work on that single target, not only do we get that increased volume, but we can also get improvements in clarity and rate as well. It's intensive. You're going to go 14 to 16 hours of therapy in a month. So you're going 3 to 4 days a week for an hour long, and you're drilling. So you're going to start at the single sound level with an ah, and you're going to work up to conversation, and you're looking at a sound level meter, and I'm telling you, I want you to do that. I want you to think about being loud. Or in speak out, they use the cue, I want you to speak with intent. So it's trying to get that cue internalized so that every time you talk, you're using this voice that may feel a little loud to you, but we're trying to recalibrate it so that when you're out of the therapy room, it becomes your automatic voice. But then what we know is that sometimes, often, that internal cue is harder to generalize outside of therapy. All right, so what do we know? And this is 101 when you go to, when you are becoming a therapist in any type of therapy. A natural external cue is the most effective kind of cue. And that's the same for anything, and it includes increases in loudness. So this is where I got involved with Speechvive, because I was looking for another option for my Parkinson's patients, because patients were having such a hard time progressing outside of the therapy room with being louder. And then this is where Jessica really saw the need for research. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of give you the briefest genesis story of the Speechvive possible. So we know, as Ashleigh's just nicely taught us, natural cues work for increasing loudness. There are some cues that work better than others, and that's what my first study showed, is that we did several different kinds of cues. Talking at comfortable was our baseline, obviously. And then we asked people with Parkinson's to get louder 3 different ways. So the first way was talking in noise, and that's what the second bar in each of these groups is. The third bar is talking at what I asked them, what do you think is twice as loud, comfortable? So that was one of those internal cues. And then we had a non-naturalistic external cue, this sound level meter, that they looked at, and they had to target a certain number on that sound level meter. And the cue that worked best for getting them louder was this noise cue. So they were basically, what the noise cue does is it elicits a very interesting technique or reflex called the Lombard effect. And if you remember, Ashleigh told us 3 major characteristics of people's speech with Parkinson's. 1 is reduced loudness. 2, the speech is less clear. And 3, the rate is changed. So sometimes that's faster. In fact, more often we see a faster rate, but it can be slower as well. And what the Lombard effect does is it makes you automatically talk louder, more clearly, and at a slower rate. So it's like a catch-all for the 3 big speech changes we hear in people with Parkinson's disease. And thank you, Art, for that question. I didn't say that. The OC is controls. So we compared them, the people with Parkinson's disease, to a group of age and sex matched older adults, and they were our older controls. And so you can see that both the older controls and the people with Parkinson's disease did best in the noise condition. That's that second bar. But where we see a big difference in the cues is really with our people with Parkinson's disease, where that noise cue was just so much better than the other 2, the internal cue and the non-naturalistic external cue. And what this taught me is that these cues that we had long thought as interchangeable aren't so interchangeable after all. And it fits with this literature that Ashleigh went over about how natural external cues work. One thing that's not on this slide that I just want to say is we also saw that the people with Parkinson's disease, their physiologic responses, the way they used their respiratory system and laryngeal system, which are like the drivers of your speech, was more normal in that noise cue than any of the other cues. So we thought this was a really good idea. And what I wanted to do is have patients have this noise when they were talking everywhere they went. And that's kind of what the Speechvive became. So next slide. Okay, so
I had a different one. There you go. Sorry.
So how do we take this external cue outside the speech therapy room, which is really important? I want the cue not to be your therapist. The cue becomes you and the family around you and the people you want to talk to. And so what we wanted to do is send people home with a device that, instead of doing the work in the therapy room and carrying that out in your everyday speech, you do work in a therapy room, but you also do work in your everyday speech. So you are wearing this device when you're talking to people in your everyday life. So next slide. So this is the Speechvive, and it, like I said, it plays a little noise in your ear. It only plays while you're speaking, and we call that noise a cocktail party sound. And that's because it sounds like you're at a party and everyone's talking and you can't understand what anyone's saying, and it's loud. And that's the perfect sound to get a really nice response, really nice Lombard effect response. We calibrate these to each person's unique profile, so it works for you as an individual, not some broad devices. Really is honed to you. We ask you to wear it every day in your normal speaking environments, and we can even adjust it as you get better. We can keep boosting you. We can keep pushing you to do better and better. Next slide.
I'm going to interrupt real quick.
Yes.
Jessica, you mentioned the Lombard effect, and I'm sure it'll be on Jeopardy. So can you do a quick explanation?
So it is basically a natural reflex we all have. You've been doing it your whole life, at least your adult life. We don't know much about kids, but we've done it your whole life. You go into a restaurant, you go into a party, you naturally talk louder, you naturally talk clearer, and you naturally talk slower, and you don't even realize you're doing it. In fact, in that study that I talked about earlier, where we gave them the 3 different cues, we asked them to rate how hard it was to get louder for each of those cues. And the noise cue was rated as hard as talking comfortable. And the other 2 cues were rated much more effortful. And we have some data from a clinical trial that's ongoing at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst in combination with my laboratory at Purdue that actually shows in patients who are treated with the Speechvive as compared to patients who are treated with LSVT loud, that intensive 16-hour therapy, that the patients felt that using the Speechvive was much less effortful, both mentally and physically, than LSVT. And so there's something about this natural cue that you're used to that doesn't feel as hard. But I think some of it also has to do with how it changes your body, and we'll talk about that in a second. So we've completed 5 studies with the Speechvive. All of them are multi-site. That means we do them in more than one site. And that's something you want to look for in if you're ever looking at research. You don't want just one lab always doing all of the studies, because this has to work broadly. We've looked at about 155 individuals using this device over 6 weeks to 6 months. And then we have that ongoing study that we just finished. We actually shut recruitment down with the COVID pandemic and are almost done with our data analysis, where we're comparing the Speechvive to LSVT loud. Next slide. Okay, so what did we find? And this is one of my in this picture, this is one of my patients that is important. He was one of my favorite guys, is one of my favorite guys. So our patients and caregivers both reported that consistently we've seen reports of improved communication, competence, like communication participation. We have seen increases in vocal intensity and utterance length for the majority of our speakers. So vocal intensity, meaning how loud a person talks, gets better in 75 to 80% of the people that we have seen in our studies. Speech rate improves, whether it's slowing or speeding, mostly slowing, about 2/3 of the people that we've studied. And we continue to see changes to physiology, changes to the way we use the drivers of our system, our respiratory system and our laryngeal system. As a person continues to use this device, we're seeing those changes. And the changes that we're seeing, not only do they look more like how an older adult might use those systems to produce speech, the changes that we see suggest that speaking would be less effortful as you continue to use the device. And the biggest concern I had is, would people adapt? Would they just get used to the noise? And they haven't. We've seen that out 6 months in one of our studies, and I have lots of cases of patients that have been using the device for years, and they continue to maintain and get better. I've had patients who really ended up, where we saw declines in all their other areas. They were having problems with walking and swallowing and cognition, but they were maintaining their communication through the use of the Speechvive. So next slide. And I see all your questions coming in. I'm sorry, I'm trying to watch them. And thanks to John, who's from Speechvive, trying to answer some of them. I appreciate that.
And I'm writing them all down. So at the end,
good.
We can go back.
Okay.
Okay,
so
you guys are really doing well, because I'm trying to monitor them for you too, but.
Thank you, Anissa. So I wanted to show you some data here. This is a measure of vocal intensity or loudness here on our y-axis, and we have people, this is our 6-month study, so you have them at the start is pre, post is 8 weeks later. The long-term started 4 weeks after the post and went 6 months to the long-term post. And we have them in the gold bars are with the Speechvive off, and the gray bars are with the Speechvive on. And you can see even through 6 months, they continue to get louder with the device on. And you can see that as they're using it over that 6 months, we see them even without the device getting louder. And so there's becoming a maintenance effect the longer they use it. So next slide.
I'm going to point out on this too, because this is something even for me as a clinician is confusing, and Jessica and I've talked about it a lot. Decibels are a logarithmic scale. So when you look at this and you see that at the beginning they were at 80 decibels without the device on, and then at the end they were at 83, 84 with the device on, that doesn't sound very exciting, but that's about 50% louder. So I just want to kind of put that in terms that are a little easier to understand. So our engineers in the field, I shout out, you can do a tutorial on logarithmic scales later.
Yeah. And I have a quick question before we get off, before we move on from Judith. Does the voice ever improve enough to discontinue use? And that's a really good question that I'm still, will take more data to answer. But my usual answer is that Parkinson's is a degenerative disease. You might maintain for a while. And I've had patients like not use the device for a couple of months because they feel like they're maintaining, and they'll have, you know, an infection or a decline or something. They can pop that device right back on and build back up. Do I recommend people discontinue? No, because I want to keep you built up. But I think that it is possible to have breaks from the device as long as you continue to use your voice and you monitor it for when it's time to put the device back on and get yourself tuned back up. Ashleigh, would you add anything to that?
In therapy, I'm going to tell you to wear it every day, all day, because you're always going to have your strongest voice when you have it on. I like to tell people it would be just like if you came to me for physical therapy, which I don't recommend. If I wanted your legs to get stronger and I told you to wear ankle weights and just do your normal daily routine and walk around, you'd get stronger just because you had more load through those muscles, that system. Same thing, every time you talk, when you're wearing the Speechvive, we're pushing you into that higher intensity voice. We're seeing that coordination Jessica talked about, and it turns into your practice and exercise. So I always want you getting the more bang for the buck, because we know with Parkinson's, you use it or you lose it.
And can I just interrupt? And I've seen several people ask about the use with hearing aids. So can you address that?
Sure. So the device goes in one ear. So if someone has bilateral hearing aids, it's hard to use this because you have to have an open ear. If you have one hearing aid, it can go in the other ear. If you have bilateral, it's much more difficult. We can't tap it into your hearing aid like you do with your loop systems. We haven't developed that kind of a loop in. Ashleigh, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on the formulary with the VA system, which is one of the biggest providers of hearing aids in the country for all of our veterans with hearing loss. And they all get Speechvives as well. So frequently what we suggest is take the hearing aid out in the ear with your better hearing and wear one hearing aid and one Speechvive. The nice thing is the Speechvive is always ready to go. There's actually no buttons on it. There's nothing to learn on it. So when you're in a speaking heavy situation, we want you wearing the Speechvive and a hearing aid. When you're somewhere where it's more of a listening situation, like a religious service or a movie, put both hearing aids in. And this is ready to go. You can put it in its case and have it when you're ready. Now, everybody asks about hearing aids, but then when they come to see me, they never have them in their ear. And I say, well, where are your hearing aids? And they say, well, they're at home in my nightstand. The Speechvive will tattle on you if you don't wear it. So it will tell me if you've actually been wearing it when you come to see me. So the bigger question is, if you're wearing hearing aids, is this going to snuggle up next to it in the nightstand? Because then I don't want you to wear it. I want you to do something. We're going to do something else in therapy. The only way it works is if it's in your ear.
Yeah. We've had a few questions about tinnitus and how the sound relates to tinnitus. Not being an audiologist, I have to admit that my tinnitus knowledge is maybe not up to snuff, but maybe Ashley, this doesn't mimic what I understand tinnitus to be. So it's not
Right.
a ringing sound. It's
So
like, go ahead, Ashley.
a lot of our veterans have tinnitus and are being followed by audiologists for it. Sometimes audiologists will use hearing aids as a masker to cover the effect of tinnitus, where they're actually playing a sound in your ear that cancels out the tinnitus sound and can make it more comfortable. The Speechvive cannot do that, but typically people do not report that it exacerbates their tinnitus. The nice thing about it is you can try it. And I know that was mentioned earlier. We do have an iPhone app, and we'll talk about how to find that at the end to play the sound. So you can play it. It would be no different than playing music or listening to a phone call through an earbud. So playing it briefly to determine if this is something you'd be comfortable with or not shouldn't be complicate any type of situation like tinnitus.
And remember, the reason it won't mimic or mask like a tinnitus masker will is it's only on when you're talking. So it's on for very short periods. You know, each time you take a breath, it's going to click off. And so it's really just very targeted for when you're producing speech. And it really does sound very much, in fact, it is a recording of 20 people saying different things all at once. And so it sounds very much like a restaurant. If you've been, well, it's COVID, so who's been one recently, but hopefully you remember back to the before times. So Ashley, do you want to take over here?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, the moral of the story is Speechvive can be a good option for you if volume, clarity, and rate are things that you think would improve your speech volume or your speech intelligibility. Things we've heard from patients, his sense of humor's back. He's able to participate in the conversation. We're not talking over him. Speechvive has given us our marriage back. I've heard that more times than I can even count. And it's as a married person, trying to put myself in the position of a care partner or someone with a communication disorder and a disease process, there's a lot that you lose in that relationship, and being able to keep communication would absolutely be invaluable. I've had some patients where a gentleman's parents were very elderly and unable to come and see him. And the only way they could communicate was on the phone, and his mom had a severe hearing loss. And we were able to increase his volume over about a 4-month period of about 200%, where they could talk on the phone again. Just connection. That's what we're able to provide, and it's immediate. So instead of having to come and see me for that month and committing to the everyday practice, even after you're out of therapy, you're not off the hook. Being able to get that result immediately and use it and make those phone calls and have those face-to-face interactions is huge. We have quite a few people that have been able to maintain their jobs because of communication improvements. So I have a feeling everyone has their one thing that could be improved with their voice and communication. All right, I see everybody's questions. Let's stop for a second and answer some of those, because we're going to go into a little bit of a different slides after this, where Jessica and we are both speech pathologists, so we can't leave you without any type of helpful thing you can do right away to improve your communication. But let's make sure we can answer some of these specific to Speechvive. There was a really good one earlier, and John answered it, but about voice changes after DBS. Has anyone noticed that their voice changed as a result of having deep brain stimulation? Jessica, please chime in. Absolutely, you can experience changes to your voice. Often they can actually calibrate the DBS with some of the newer ones that have multiple programming, where you might have a walk setting and a talk setting to improve that. Jessica's research is all included patients with DBS in it, and we've seen the same improvements for that population as those without DBS. That's really important because those other types of coaching models haven't been able to show quite that, that level of improvement. Dementia came up a couple times. Absolutely, cognitive changes are something that we're always looking at with Parkinson's and can make those internal cues harder to use. That's at a time where, you know, if I'm doing that coaching model, I'm really bringing the care partner in and saying, when they get home, I need you to remind them. Because Speechvive uses that automatic cue, there's no new learning needed to use it. You put it in their ear and it works. In fact, when I put this on patients as part of my evaluations, I don't tell them that I want them to speak louder when they hear the sound. I just tell them they're going to wear something that makes sound and just to speak normally, just like Jessica did in her studies. So this can be actually a very good option for people experiencing some changes to cognition and memory. Hearing aids, can it interfere with articulation and thought processing? So yes, it can interfere with articulation. That's something we want it to interfere with. We actually want it to make it better. We've seen improvement in the clarity of speech. As far as thought processing, there have been studies going on with that. But we also know anecdotally that we have people that are high communicators and in the workforce, software engineers, trial attorneys, real estate developers that are using the Speechvive because they need it to continue to work. And they're working at a very high level and not experiencing any changes there. We'll talk about,
can I just jump in? Art,
yeah.
You asked about your father being in a care facility and having dementia, and would he lose it? That's really something that you might be better to answer. But we have had a lot of success with clinicians using these in care facilities. And there were patients with dementia in our studies. I, not knowing your father and how much dementia he has or what his care facility is like, I can't answer that, but definitely it could be something to try with your father.
Having been a speech pathologist in care facilities for 15 years, this is no different than dentures, hearing aids, walkers, canes. Everyone has individual equipment assigned to them. And so it's very much about how that gets put into the care plan. The bonus is when you're using a communication device, there's typically a speech pathologist involved, and we're notorious for being type A personalities and keeping track of things. So, it would certainly be worth having a conversation about.
And Sam, I saw your question about whether it's 100% successful. Unfortunately, no treatment is 100% successful. In our studies, we see about 85 to 90% of our patients do better. Some do a lot better, and some do, it's very variable how much better they do. What we usually see is the more, obviously this kind of makes sense, the more severe your speech is, the bigger change that we see. But we've studied it from very mild speech impairments to people who are about 25% intelligible, meaning I, a trained speech pathologist, was understanding 1 in 4 words. And so we've seen really great gains from people severely impaired. And good gains from a broad swath of patients.
Yeah, and that's something too, I think something was mentioned. Does this mean, number one, that you're never gonna need speech therapy? I mean, I'm a speech therapist. Jessica's shaking her head no. We still want to see you. Speech pathologists work on more than just speech clarity. We actually work on cognition and swallowing, and then all those other aspects that go into speech. So it may be that I know that I can hit that goal of getting you loud enough to be heard off the bat with the Speechvive. But maybe you're saying, you know what, I do feel like I want to work on my rate a little bit. we're going to do that as well. And then you're going to see I'm going to be checking your thinking skills every time you see me, and probably having you eat or drink a little snack and watching that as well. And those are different topics for other days that I'm sure Becky and Anissa have set up as well. Because just get comfy, guys. Speech pathologists are your best friends. All right, so let's go through the effective communication strategies.
There's a lot of questions about the cost. How do you get one? Insurance, and you don't have to go through PT at all. This is really speech therapy. So no need to go through physical therapy for it.
So we'll do that on the last slide. It has our contact information and how to talk about insurance. So we'll do that at the very end, if that works. So I'm sure I'm not the only person that's ever said this, but communication takes more than one person. So when you're thinking about how to be an effective communicator, there are strategies for you as the speaker and your communication partner as the listener. And these are also ones that I think we can all say, oh, I've been guilty of that, as the listener or the speaker. So as far as some speaker managed strategies, really think about if you're having a big conversation, and this is something I always used to talk about once upon a time when people got together at holidays with people they hadn't seen in a while. Think about the timing when you're going to have that conversation. We know with Parkinson's, you've got on times and off times. Everyone usually is able to tell me, you know what, I'm better talking at this time of day. Okay, use that to your advantage. Stack the deck. Make sure that's when you're having your important conversations. Do you have to make a phone call to the IRS? Sorry, do it during your prime time when you're feeling your best and your speech is your best. Make sure you time things correctly. Select a conducive environment. Make sure you're somewhere where it's quiet, there's not a lot of background noise, you're not fighting to be heard. Also distractions. How easy is it, especially kind of as we all have shortened our attention spans, when we're talking, if there's something else going on in the room, it's very easy to see our communication partner's eyes wander or ours. So really controlling that situation. Using gestures, you probably see me jumping around, I'm doing it right now. The more input we can give while we're speaking to get our point across, the easier it is to understand us. There have been studies that have shown that we hear with our eyes as much as our ears, so give them all the input we can. Listener managed. So when you're the listener or you're with your care partner listening to you, maintain the topic identity. This is one I wish I was better at in my marriage. Make sure you're periodically checking in to make sure you're on the same topic. So when you're the listener, hey, wait, I just want to make sure we're still talking about the same thing. Pay attention to the speaker. Minimize those distractions. That's a two-way street. So that might mean, you know what, I really want to hear you. Let's go somewhere quieter and less distracting so that I can focus better. Piece together the clues. Take those pieces, like Jessica said, understanding 25%. You take the pieces of what you're hearing, you're checking in on the topic, and then you're going to say, okay, I think what we're talking about is this. Really work, be an active listener. Communication breakdowns. Again, this is for both of us. When you're the speaker, encourage the listener to let you know when they don't understand. This is a big thing in therapy, is that self-disclosure piece. I have a communication problem. Sometimes it's hard to understand me. Please tell me if you need me to clarify. That's going to save you guys a lot of headache and heartache. Avoid simply repeating the same message. Again, this is like a marriage counseling situation for some of us. Don't just say the same thing over and over. Rephrase. Give all those gestures. Try to explain it a different way. Describe it. Create a strategy. 4 breakdowns that's agreed upon between the speaker and the listener. So this can be a really good thing. Say you're with your care partner and you guys are in a social situation. You may let them know, and you may have practiced together before you go, a little strategy so that I, as the care partner, don't talk over you when I should be waiting and giving you time to answer and making sure and saying, oh, you know what, I think John has some more to say, and giving you that space to communicate. Or you might give me the little indicator so that I know when to step in and support you more. Shadowing, that's when the listener's repeating what the speaker says to demonstrate and check that comprehension again, like we mentioned in the listener strategies. All right, those are all based on research. This is my list. We're now in a virtual communication world, and no one's done this list, so we added it. Please use all the modalities you have. I want to see your face and I want to hear you when we're in a Zoom, when we're doing telehealth, anything like that. Being able to see the visual provides so much more input for understanding. Use a headphone and a mic. I can't tell you how much easier it is to hear each other when you have headphones in versus the lousy speakers on the laptop. Same thing goes for the microphone. It's a lot closer to my mouth. And when it's closer to your mouth, it's easier to understand you as well. Typically, too, these headphones have way better mics than that laptop does. Again, here's the dead horse. Limit the distractions and the background noise. For Pete's sake, turn off the TV. I had one couple tell me, well, I have a hard time understanding him. And I said, well, tell me a little bit about the situation. Well, it was during the election. We had the TV on loud from the other room so we could hear it. I was cooking and I burned something on the stove, so I turned the vent fan on, and he was behind me chopping vegetables. I couldn't hear him at all. Right, correct. Turn it off, limit the distractions, face each other. And then again, schedule the best time of the day, stack the deck in your favor. If you've got to have a big meaty conversation, make it at the time of day where you're at your best. That's a good time to schedule those doctor's appointments, anything like that. All right, now the big question, funding. So this is where we get to be vague and opaque, like every funding conversation. Is it covered? Yes, it's covered by the VA, Medicare, and private insurance. You see my asterisk at the bottom? They make me put that on there. Yes, your coverage may vary based on your specific plan. I cannot tell you how much you as an individual will pay for the device because it has everything to do with your copay, deductible, and the plan you've selected. But I don't have to find that out. We work with DME suppliers that will do that with you. You can actually go on our website. There's the link to how to order, fill that form out, and you'll be contacted to get that information from you so that they can check your insurance and tell you what your out-of-pocket cost would be. Was that vague enough for everybody? Sorry, that's what I've got. As far as any other funding questions, you can email us at info@speechvive.com. All right. Oh, Jessica, this is you. Here's your plug.
Now, if we have made you feel like, I want to be part of the next technology that improves life for people with Parkinson's disease, this slide is for you. We'll be giving you these slides. You can click here. We're running a study where we're asking people to record some speech samples through a over the internet assessment platform. We're trying to figure out an easier way for us to get you guys evaluated, more data, more kind of markers of where you are in your speech and are we improving you? And so we're working to develop a virtual assessment platform. And so we're hoping that we can get lots of people to help us do that. So that's my shameless plug here.
And you could do it in your pajamas.
Yep.
In your living room, and you get paid.
Yep.
So what's not to love? All right. This is our contact information. Feel free to reach out to Jessica or myself anytime. We love answering questions. And I know I'm seeing a couple, I want to make sure Jessica answered it as well. Do I need to see a speech therapist to get the Speechvive, try the Speechvive? How do I get this? What's involved? Do I have to fail therapy to try this out? The answer on all those is no. You can talk to your physician and say, I want to try this. You can try the app and try it in your home. Absolutely, partnering with a speech pathologist is always a great idea. And the earlier, the better. And we work with a speech pathologist to help you try it as part of your evaluation there as well. But from what insurance requires, it's the doctor, not the speech pathologist information.
This is fantastic information. Someone said that the link for the study didn't work. Can someone maybe copy that in the chat and then they can go to it directly from there? That would be awesome. And if there isn't any insurance coverage for that,
I'll get that link. I just want to say that. Sorry to interrupt you, Anissa.
Well, that's okay. Is there a self-pay option, and what would that be?
Yeah, so the cash price for the device is $3,495. So that is the cash pay option. There are a lot of funding resources out there for people that may be uninsured or underinsured, and that's something we can assist with as well.
And if you could copy in to learn more here, I'm on your website now trying to find that particular link.
It's not on the website. It's going to be, it's from Jessica's lab. There it is in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Pauline wanted to know about the question about a lisp. So I think what she had referred to was that she had Invisalign and it changed and she developed the lisp. So I don't know if you can answer that question, but she's asked it twice. So I thought I would bring that up.
Yeah, so I think I saw that question earlier, Pauline. Sorry, I had it. It was Jessica. She had Invisalign braces, and after she had them off, she developed a lisp. She didn't know if that was related to the braces or the Parkinson's.
Okay, my guess is that, I mean, I don't know you, so it's hard for me to say, but mouth appliances like Invisalign and all host of them have been shown numerous times to result in a lisp, but it should eventually go away once you stop wearing the Invisalign, so you'll revert back. So if this is something that is ongoing and you've stopped wearing the Invisalign, then that might be something to talk to a speech pathologist about, or talk to your neurologist about, just to double check. So generally what we see is we see a change in speech with the use of the appliance that goes away when you stop using the appliance. Does that help at all? Sorry, Pauline, I saw that flip by and I just couldn't answer fast enough.
No worries. We had a lot of great questions and you provided a lot of great information. So ladies, I really appreciate your time. I didn't know if you had any last minute things that you wanted to say before we close out for the afternoon.
The only thing I'll say, there was one last question about, should I use the Speechvive before I notice a change in my voice? That's a good question. That study hasn't been done yet, but what I can tell you is that really best practice would be as soon as you get diagnosed with Parkinson's, go see a speech pathologist. Get them on your care team, because what we can do is go ahead and take some of those measurements and find out where your baseline is, so that as things change, we can notice those changes sooner and help address them before they become more severe. And that's not just that speech side, but that's that cognition and that swallowing side as well. So when people ask me, when should I see a speech pathologist, I usually say yesterday, as soon as you can.
All right, ladies, well, we are at the top of the hour, so I thank you so much for joining us, for sharing all of that wonderful information. And in keeping to our tradition, as we thank our speakers for providing us such wonderful information, if you want to enable your screen or your video, if you're not on screen right now, we would love to give them a wave of gratitude for their time. We thank you who have joined us today for this fantastic information. We put the link on there if you want to learn more about the device and or getting involved in their study. Ladies, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having us, and thank you all for attending. Holy goodness, there's so many of you.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.